All right, good afternoon. Welcome to the City of Glendale Council workshop session of April 12th, 2022. Meeting is called to order. I'm not going to call roll call. All council members are present and accounted for. So with that, Ms. Barr, let's go right on into item number 1. Would you announce that, please?
Fiscal year 2022-23 Community Development Block Grant Public Service Funding Recommendations.
Good afternoon, Mayor, members of the council. Here today to lead our staff report will be first Jean Marino, our Director of Community Services. She'll be assisted by the very capable Matthew Hess, who is our Revitalization Administrator. I love that term, that title of a job, and it's certainly, we have a lot of evidence of that happening. And so, Jean, you and Matthew can take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Phelps. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. So today we'll be presenting the Community Development Block Grant Public Service Grant Award recommendations from the Community Development Advisory Committee, and we'll be looking for consensus recommendation from Council to move forward to adopt those in our action plan. And then we also wanted to get some feedback from the City Council at the conclusion of your consensus regarding the process. As you know, we've made several improvements to our grant application process over the last couple of years, and so we wanted to get some additional feedback from you on just the process in general. So with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Hess.
Thank you, Ms. Moreno. Mayor, members of the council, before we discuss some of the specific Cdac recommendations, I'd like to give you a little bit of background on this year's funding cycle, some of the selection criteria that the Cdac determined to make those recommendations. So we did receive 22 applications this year, which is a little bit above normal, requesting just under $1.2 million. Which is about 3 times what we actually have available. If you recall, the CDBG allows up to 15% of your total allocation towards public services, which is generally in the $370,000 range. We did receive a considerable range of requests from $7,000 to $370,000. In terms of the requests themselves, it did run the vulnerable populations that were requested to be served, did run the gambit, but most were requested to serve the disabled, seniors, and youth, with the services that you see here, mostly for physical and mental health, and self-sufficiency, education, and food and nutrition. So prior to reviewing the applications, staff met with the Cdac and its subcommittee to determine exactly what scoring criteria would be used. We have these 6 general themes that the Cdac used to rate the applications, and you'll see the actual ratings in your council packets. One was administrative costs, keeping those under 10%, additional cost sharing, and what other resources the agencies would be bringing to the table in order to leverage the city's resources. Obviously, the impact to Glendale residents and the cost per unit of service. If they had any additional partnerships or the organizations that they were bringing in to supplement and provide a more holistic service, prior performance for those organizations that have received funding in the past, and capacity of those agencies. One thing of note, it was a little bit different. If you notice in the list of applications that we did receive, there were a number of applications that were not recommended for funding because obviously we had not enough to fund everybody, and so we did discuss with some of those recommended agencies, or the agencies that were not recommended for funding, to provide other sources of funding potentially for those. So looking at the request, the type of service, the benefit to Glendale, the Cdac felt that those were valuable services, but given the amount of money that is available, they thought it would be prudent to be able to try to pair those requests for funding to other agencies. And so we did make some phone calls to those other agencies to see if they would be amenable to either getting funding through the Master Services Agreement or some other funding sources. And so that was a way that the Cdac was able to not give a hard no to agencies because they did value those services, but understanding that there was not enough money to fund all services in full. And so here is the list of Cdac recommendations. You see that beyond those that you see, other than those agencies that you see in your council packets, the Cdac did recommend to fund all other agencies in full, with a couple of small exceptions. And so we're asking today for consensus direction to fund these grant applications at the levels that the Cdac has recommended.
So with that, we would be open to any questions you may have about the applications or the recommendations.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. I did have one question for the Glencroft, the promoting food security. What is that? Is that for the community, or I thought that the residents that were there got meals, so I just wanted to understand what that it means, promoting food security.
So Mayor, Councilmember Tolmachoff, that is a food pantry for residents and low-income staff. So residents are able to purchase, residents and some of their staff are able to purchase subsidized food.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Anyone else?
Yes, Mayor.
Go ahead.
Yes. I'm just uncomfortable with one grant that has been recommended, and that's One Step Beyond. And it targets disabled kids through the use of hockey, which is problematical for the city these days. I would think that something that does nearly the same thing, which is physical therapy for persons with severe disabilities, might be a better way to add more money to them rather than supporting One Step Beyond and its program at this time. That's the only comment that I would make.
Mayor, Councilmember Clark, certainly it's the council's decision as to what applications are funded. I can say in the context of the ask, the service that is being provided is it's creating teamwork and self-sufficiency among those disabled, and also the benefits of participating in an athletic program.
Well then, thank you, Mayor. I would ask council to see if they're interested in consensus in moving that money from One Step Beyond to Valley Life.
Mayor, if I might. Mayor and Councilmember Clark, I did want to point out that the recommendation to fund Valley Life at $9,945 represents their entire request. So that
really?
does, correct, yes.
Well, then I would amend that request to the rest of council and say, I would like to see the allocation of One Step Beyond move to another agency that of your choosing, of staff's choosing.
Mayor and Councilmember, we're certainly welcome to entertain any recommendations from the council. We are certainly looking for consensus today. This particular request does meet and does target a specific population that is aligned with our consolidated plan focused on youth education and disabilities.
Yeah, hold on a sec. The Operation Enduring Gratitude, I've actually dealt with that 2 or 3 times, and I think as you have. And that's one group that I'm not sure, was the $40,000 what they asked for, or is that what was agreed to give to them?
Yes, Mayor, that's correct. That's the full ask.
Which is amazing to me, because I know that they can easily go through that. They've got one home build that they've got way more than that in just for one veteran already. So if there was any money that was transferred from one and put somewhere else, I'd certainly like to see it go to them, because I know they have the ability to use it up. So for whatever it's worth, I don't have any problem with any of these personally. The Operation Enduring Gratitude, I've seen a lot of benefit come out of that to a lot of members. So if that money did come out of that other one and went anywhere, that's where I'd personally like to see it go. Who had the next question? You did.
Yeah, I'm a strong supporter of One Step Beyond. They have a facility in my district and have operated there. I've been to their Peoria facility. They do some pretty amazing with handicapped children. Now, I'm not sure exactly what this Hockey Teach Life Skills is, but I doubt they're going to be using the arena or the Coyotes facilities. They're probably going to use perhaps the ice stand up in Peoria and perhaps other places where they can do that, or even just a land hockey out on the tennis court. So I would be in favor of leaving that there, just because I think they do a great service for our handicapped teenagers and kids.
Anyone else?
Mayor?
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Have we supported other programs at One Step Beyond? And is this up, because I mean, I've been to plays there. I know they have a culinary department that, I've been to events where they're culinary, and it's a young, and who's not familiar with it, it's a One Step Beyond basically is for young adults once they graduate from high school, that aren't going to be attending college, that there's a place for them to go and learn skills and have social activities, and they do a lot of neat stuff. But I can't remember whether I've seen them in there, and is this hockey program something new that they're trying to launch?
Mayor, Councilmember Tomachov, this would be the second year of funding. So FY 21-22, they were funded at their full ask of $10,000.
Mayor, if I could, for this hockey program?
Correct.
Oh, I don't even recall that. I don't either. Okay. I would say, though, I mean, I don't think all of these are actually located in Glendale, and One Step Beyond is in Glendale. So,
Facility here, a couple of them.
yeah, I mean, I know that they're over off of Bell Road over there by, across from Arrowhead Mall. So I don't know, it just sounds, the fact that it's a Glendale operation, I feel like maybe we shouldn't take the money away from them, especially if we funded this program in the past. That's my feeling.
Mayor?
Yes.
I have no problem with One Step Beyond. It's just this particular offering and their request. And I do like your idea of moving that money to the program to repair vets' homes. And you're right, it doesn't, $40,000 doesn't go very far when you're talking about repairing someone's home. Also, I think the focus maybe missed was with inflation the way it is. What is it, 8.5% was announced today? If anything, seniors and youth and other groups are going to have trouble getting food. And if we were going to focus on anything, it would be also food safety for a lot of people these days. Thank you.
Any other comments? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you again, Mayor. I just want to say I'm comfortable with this proposal for One Step Beyond. It was mentioned that hockey somehow has become problematic, and I just want to say I don't have a problem with hockey or any other sport. All I've ever had a problem with is taxpayer subsidy of professional sports. This is clearly not that. And this has been, all of these proposals have been reviewed in depth by our Cdac, and these are their recommendations. Personally, unless I had a really solid reason not to support something, I'm happy to go with their recommendation. Thank you.
There, I have one more question. Good. Thank you. I mean, these all have other resources. I mean, it's not like Boys and Girls Club. All of these people on this list have resources to fund programs outside of what we're doing. They apply to other cities, they apply for other grants. So I would imagine, everybody on this list has got, Operation Enduring Freedom, is that what it's called, is not going to be existing just on the $40,000 on this sheet. I mean, they've got other places where they can get funding. So this is just for CDBG money only, right?
Mayor and Councilmember Tomachov, that's correct. This is just for the 15% that's dedicated to public services.
Okay, Mayor, and if I could follow up then, will there be other opportunities to, and is there other opportunities that Operation Enduring Freedom has applied through us for?
Mayor and Councilmember Cholmachoff, not specifically through community services, but many of these organizations would also be eligible to apply for grants through the pass-through, through the tribes, as well as through From the Heart as well.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor?
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Turner really took my comments. I'm fine the way it is, the way it's presented to us. If we were going to move dollars, Operation Enduring Gratitude would be one that I would support. I've worked with them quite a bit in the community here. But I do want to just say that they don't have a continued and regular revenue stream. What they do is they find people to help. They get in there and get their hands dirty, and then they go out and look for funds. And sometimes they don't even get the funds. They just people volunteer and give the material. Lowe's for one, Home Depot for the other. But they don't have a regular funding stream. So coming to the city of Glendale, this dollar amount may not even cover their needs because of the inflation and the material backlog and stuff like that. But I just want to make sure everybody understands that they don't have a regular funding mechanism. This would be very helpful to them, and they help a lot of people in the community. But what's presented to me today, I have no problem with. I know that previously there was an issue, there was a item that came to us with regard to solar. I didn't think that was appropriate, but today I think everything here is appropriate. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll finish up, and I guess we'll move on. The Operation Enduring Gratitude, again, my point was if we're going to move money, that's where I'd like to see it go. In the past, my office has actually given amounts of money to them, along with what Vice Mayor spoke of as donations from not only Home Depot, Lowe's, folks like that, but Glendale business. Monty Glass, they have literally saved veterans and spouses of veterans from losing their homes and becoming homeless. So all these people work, they donate their time, a large volunteer force shows up. It's a great effort, and they've gotten a lot of good news coverage on it as far as what they do. So that one probably more than all of them I certainly support, but if any money was going to be moved, that's where I'd like to see it moved. I don't have any problem with the way this is laid out. I'm not going to second guess the folks that made the recommendations. But the Operation Enduring Gratitude is really, I think that's one of the really sweet spots that we have in our Glendale for our nonprofits. It does an amazing job. So with that, any other discussion? So we have a consensus as this is laid out right now?
Yeah. Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
So then, thank you, Mayor. So the last thing that we wanted to talk to you about is just the overall process. I mentioned early on that we've made some significant changes as to how we run our grant program on an annual basis. And so thanks to the policy direction, the previous policy direction of the council, we've been able to really create a laser focus to ensure that the investments are aligned with council's priorities and that are thoroughly reviewed by our Community Development Advisory Committee, which is appointed by the council. And so you can see that we utilize a consistent matrix to rank these applications. Cdac subcommittee meets and really vets all of these applications and makes recommendations to the full committee, and then it comes to the council. So what we wanted to talk to you about today is this actual workshop that we come to and providing an option, certainly at council's pleasure, of whether or not you want us to come back with these recommendations at a workshop on an annual basis, or if you would like, because of the fact that we have instituted some significant and consistent changes as to how we run the grant application process, what we would do is come back to you at the beginning of the grant cycle, make sure that we're aligned with it. So as an example, if you decided that for next year's public services grants, you wanted to focus on specific types of services or serving specific populations, we could set that out on the front end and then go through the process utilizing the scoring matrix, et cetera, and then still provide that information to you via memorandum. How you would still have an opportunity to ask us any questions, but then rather than coming back to a workshop, take that to a voting meeting because of the fact that this has become a routine business and there's not, because of the policy decisions that council has already previously made and have been implemented. So it's just an option, but we are certainly happy to continue to bring this forward to the council for public discussion in terms of reviewing Cdac's recommendations.
Yeah, a question I have for you, from the heart, when are those decisions made from the heart?
Mayor and council members, I would have to follow up with you on that because that does not fall under our department as far as the decisions. I know the applications typically close in February, but we can follow up with some information for you
The
on that.
reason I'm asking if there was a way that we could synchronize that along with what we're doing right this minute, it would be nice to know what's getting covered, what isn't. If some are getting double grants, it'd just be nice to be able to put a package together to where if somebody doesn't get funded, we know the other one could cover that.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd be happy to work with Ms. Rios on that.
Mayor?
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Question, I heard from an organization, and rightfully so, that what they brought to me, so I asked why this organization hasn't applied for CBD, and it's just too difficult now. So back in maybe 15, 16, we changed the process. I think you have to have some type of business plan. Do you know what that is that's preventing some from applying? Because they feel like they need to hire grant writers or other individuals that can really get this through the pipe, and it's just too difficult. I think it needs to be somewhat difficult, but anything you know that's changed?
Mayor and Vice Mayor, if anything, we've made it a lot easier since 15, 16. So the process improvements that we've made over the last 2 years have really been designed to make it easier for maybe less sophisticated or less experienced organizations to submit for those grant awards. So I'd be happy to do some follow-up with them just to make sure that, A, we have them on our distribution list so they're receiving notifications, because not only do we push out notifications about our grant process, but when we receive notifications about RFPs that the county or the state are doing, we push those out to our nonprofit providers as well. So we'd be happy to do some follow-up. And if the feedback that we're getting is that our process is still challenging for nonprofits to apply, we would love to get that feedback so that we can continue to improve.
Okay, and this is one organization, but a really important organization. I'll get you the information. You can speak with them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor.
But actually, Mr. Milner.
Thank you. Regarding the council feedback that you were talking about, I like the idea of giving you some feedback early on so we can kind of give you some priorities where we think it should go. But I kind of like the idea of it still coming to council. I know last year we had some changes we made. We saw some things that we wanted changed. And I think it still is valuable for council to have that brought back to a workshop where we can, spend a few minutes to review it and discuss it.
Thank you, Mayor. And I agree with Councilmember Milner. And I mean, we would be able to get the information anyway, but one of the other valuable things of coming to a workshop is it's presented in an understandable format to the public, and it provides transparency on how how this money is being used in our community. So I think there's value in that. That's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with the previous statements. I would like to see as much made public, and this is a public forum. I like the idea of getting involved in the process early so that we can give direction in terms of our priorities. I like the idea of having a workshop where we can review the recommendations, and it's a public process. Thank you, Mayor.
Anyone else? Okay.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Bauer, item number 2.
Wigwam Annexation AN-237, annexation of 4.38 acres located south and west of the southwest corner of Bethany Home Road and Litchfield Road.
Mayor, members of the council, here to provide staff report this afternoon will be Tabitha Perry, our interim planning manager.
Thank you, Mr. Phelps. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. The Wigwam property is a annexation proposal that is being presented before Council during this workshop, as we are seeking consensus to move forward with the application, and that is keeping in compliance with the annexation policy that was adopted in 2019. The subject site is approximately 4.38 acres in size, and it is located south and west of the southwest corner of Bethany Home Road and Litchfield Road. The property is currently in the county with a zoning classification of RU43, which allows for single-family residential. Upon annexation, the city would apply the most compatible like zoning, which would be RR45, which also would allow for single-family residential. The property owner, via applicant, has submitted an application to rezone the property to PAD as part of a larger industrial project. Here's the vicinity map that depicts the proposed location from City Hall, which is approximately 10 miles southwest of City Hall. The annexations map, just to give you an idea of where this proposed application is located in comparison to other property for annexation that's in the process or being considered. Here's an annexation map that depicts surrounding the subject property. It's property that is currently within the city limits, and those surrounding properties are currently zoned M1 for light industrial. And by annexing this property, it was just removed what we would define as a donut hole property that is not within the city limits. So it would just bring this particular property within the city limits to allow for a cohesive development moving forward. Here is an annexation area map, just giving you a earth look of the subject site. The subject site is not within the Luke Air Force Base north contour, so we do not have to worry about Luke as it relates to the heights.
Always worry about Luke.
There's a conceptual site plan to the north that is a rezoning application that would be forthcoming before City Council at a future date, and that is identified as Air Park 30 North, and that is intended for a industrial PAD. The subject site that we're looking at for the proposed annexation will be part of a second PAD entitled Air Park South PAD, which like so would be developed as an industrial development. Okay. So there was a fiscal impact analysis completed on this project. The subject area for the south would total 66,000 square feet of industrial development and would generate a positive net fiscal impact to the city. Okay. With the one-time fees being proposed estimated at $263,000 and a positive impact to the city of $10,000 per year, which excludes the one-time revenues. So fiscal impact bar chart just showing you the revenues, expenditures, and the net gain to the city annually from a different perspective. And once again, staff is seeking a consensus from council to proceed forward with the annexation. If council give directions to proceed forward with the annexation, the next steps would be for a blank petition, doing a public hearing to hear any input from the citizens, followed by a adoption date on the annexation. With that, Mayor and Council, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm a little puzzled because this seems like an ideal site for commercial rather than industrial. There's quite a commercial corridor just south on Litchfield Road, and there's few and far between opportunities for us out there with commercial where, I mean, at least for me, I'd like to see somebody, an economic analysis, look at what if we zoned at least the frontage on Litchfield Road for regular commercial, because with the Luke contours, there's not a lot of places where we can do that out there. And I mean, if you go south, once you get to Camelback and all the way down, it's quite a commercial corridor along Litchfield Road, and there's a lot of residential all around there to support it. So I just, you know, I mean, I know we're doing a lot of industrial, but I think the council clearly, when we first started talking about this, where we want cash registers where there's opportunities to put cash registers. So, I mean, apparently there's already somebody that wants to, this wouldn't be spec, this is a user already in mind for this industrial project.
Mayor, council, to my understanding, there is not an identified end user at this time. However, we have the PAD application that's just started the review process. From a staff perspective, we can take your comments and analyze the project and see if there's opportunities to incorporate commercial as well as the industrial that's being proposed.
Okay, Mayor, and I have one other follow-up. Bethany Home Road does not go through. Would this put us in a position to have to participate in extending Bethany Home Road west of, I guess that goes on to the base, so no, right?
You can't.
Yeah. So I just think that there's a real possibility for commercial in that, and it's small enough that, you know, it's only a little over 4 acres, that you could do, you know, put some sort of commercial use there that would generate ongoing revenue in excess of $10,000 a year. Thank you.
Thank you. I think Councilmember Tomachoff's suggestion is at least worth investigating and see if the applicant is interested in pursuing that at all. But my concern is, and I don't know if you can answer this or not, how was the donut allowed to be created to begin with? I thought there was state law that said that when annexations occurred, you couldn't fully encircle a property to create this kind of donut. Can you explain the history of that a little bit?
Mayor, Councilmember Clark, I do not have all the historical information on that. To the best of my knowledge from working with staff and the applicant, is when the greater portion of the property came in for the annexation, Wigwam was using the subject site for some entertainment venue opportunities, and at that particular time, they were not ready to proceed forward with annexing that portion of the property into the city limits.
Well, but I thought that there was some law that prevented creating these donuts. How come that wasn't invoked at that time? I'm just curious.
Mr. Bailey.
Councilmember Clark, Mayor and Council, the unique element of our strip annexation area is, you're correct, there's a law that says you can't create basically holes in a donut. But because we have a strip annexation, any annexation that generally occurs within that strip annexation is starting to fill in the donut hole. So we generally have looked at any annexation, even if a subsequent annexation may create another donut hole, what we're ultimately trying to do is fill in this enormous donut hole. So the intent is to actually fill it in, and so there generally has not been that issue that arises in the context of what you're speaking to.
Well, I know generally it doesn't happen. I realize that. I just wondered what the circumstances were that made it occur on this occasion. Thank you.
I think the difference is we're making a city island, not a county island.
Yeah. Just curious.
Any other questions? Any other comments? Do you have what you need?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Bauer, your turn.
Agua Fria Annexation Application AN-236 for approximately 1.15 acres located south of Glendale Avenue and west of the 115th Avenue alignment.
Thank you. Mayor and Council, once again, this item is being presented to you as staff is seeking a consensus to proceed forward with the annexation request. The subject property is approximately 1.5 acres in size, and it's identified by being 2 segments of pieces of property that is city-owned, and the objective is to bring it within the city limits. The subject properties are located south of Glendale Avenue and west of the 115th Avenue alignment. The subject parcels are currently within the county with a zoning classification of RU43, and upon, which allows for that single-family residential. Upon annexation, staff would apply the most like compatible zoning classification. Since we're basically talking about two separate parcels, it will allow for two separate residential zonings upon annexation. And the intent is that at a future date, a rezoning application would come forward. The property is approximately 7.5 miles west of City Hall. Here's an annexation map. As indicated, it's actually two parcels that we're looking at. For the sake of this presentation, I'm only presenting it as one annexation. If council gives the consensus to proceed forward, for record keepings, we will have two annexation applications. One will remain as AN 236, and the second remnant piece of property will be as AN 238, and that is necessary because they're separate legal descriptions. Okay, here's your annexation map, just giving a better view of the two remnant piece of properties that are in question before you. Here's the area map, once again giving you an earth view of the remnant two pieces of properties. Excluding the two small segments of properties, this exhibit depicts the approximately 133 acres that was annexed in 2009. The city's recharge facility is depicted in pink. The area outlined in blue includes the two small properties before you for annexation, totals approximately 48 acres. Staff is working on a RFP for interested parties, and there is a fiscal impact report in your packet. If council provides a consensus to proceed forward with the annexation request, it will be followed by a blank petition for a public hearing for any opportunities for citizens to speak, followed by a public hearing for the adoption. Once again, staff is seeking a consensus on the application to proceed forward. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
Mayor.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Ms. Perry, you mentioned that when it comes into the city, if it does, that it would get zoning that would allow for large lot, single-family residential. But this is city-owned property, and I don't believe, is that our intention for it, you know, for the public to know? I don't believe that's what we intend to do with the property.
Mayor and Council Turner, if I understood your question, you are correct. It's not the intentions for the two remnant pieces of property to be developed as single-family residence. It would just be the most compatible like zoning upon the annexation, with the intent at a future date that the entire 48 acres would be rezoned to most likely some level of industrial zoning district.
Thank you, Ms. Perry. Thank you, Mayor.
Any other comments? What do you need?
A consensus to proceed forward.
Consensus to
Yes.
proceed? Yes. There you go.
Thank you.
Mr. Bauer, item 4.
Council item of special interest, facility maintenance in residential neighborhoods.
Mayor, members of the council, here to provide staff report on this item today is Michelle Watenko, Director of Field Operations, and she'll be assisted by Charles Thomas, our Field Operations Administrator.
Thank you, Mr. Phelps. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. As Mr. Phelps and Ms. Bauer just stated, this is the council item of special interest, facility maintenance in neighborhoods. This was brought up at a council workshop back in April 2021, yes, a year ago. The request was to draft a policy for facility maintenance for those facilities located within residential neighborhoods. We did come back to you in June 22nd of 2021, and we did get council consensus to proceed with this. So in today's presentation, we're going to go through kind of an outline. We're going to go back to our building asset philosophy. We started this in September of 2017. So we want to just remind you of what we did. So a summary of that philosophy, go through the categories that we have for our buildings, talk about a methodology for prioritization, and then finally a funding mechanism, because there's always a cost associated with this. So as a reminder, what is our building asset philosophy? We did this through council special workshops, September 2017 through early 2020, and this is all focused on us planning for the future. Our asset philosophy is to align us with our strategic goals and to cover things like deferred maintenance. The city has been in catch-up mode for quite a while now, and this is to give us a framework for doing that. And it's also to focus on sustainability. Beyond environmental, we also look at fiscal sustainability. Are we doing the right thing with our money? Our intended strategic results with this, intentional asset improvements yield tangible results, and we've always been focused on that. The next thing, and this is really important to us, is that effective building design facilitates effective service delivery. We can't improve the lives of the people we serve if our building impedes that, so we're trying to fix that. And finally, buildings reflect the character and values of our community. As we went through this, we looked at not all buildings are equal, and nor should they be treated equal, so we created 3 categories. We called them mission critical, business critical, and support. And to do this, really, we created those attributes, what would define a building. And examples of these, so a mission-critical building is that water treatment plant. That water treatment plant goes down, we can't provide water to our citizens, and that's really critical to the water department's mission. Business critical is those that impacts your reputation or where you transact and meet with the public. And then finally, a support building. The best example of a support building is, the administration building that I sit in every day. If something happens to that building, we still pick up the trash. We still take care of the facilities. So that's kind of a support building. It's needed to do some things, but it can be done from elsewhere. The building is not critical to it. So just a little bit more on these examples. So mission critical, these tend not to be open to the public. They tend to be high secure facilities. We've got an example there shown. That's Fire Station 154. So infrastructure in these and safety is always our top priority. But aesthetics are a little bit lower, and when we get into components, we talk about that. For the fire department to perform its mission, that building needs to be up and ready. The need to open the second they get that call. The air conditioning needs to work, the electricity needs to work to open the door for them. But we may, from a facilities perspective, allow other aspects of that building to degrade slightly because we look at the components that are critical to its mission. The second category we created was business critical. In that building, because this is where we transact with the public, this is where we generate revenue, and this is where our reputation is, aesthetics are more important in that one. Think of it, we always talk curb appeal in real estate. This is the curb appeal of the city. This is not just painting, but things like doors, awnings, landscaping. And our final category we created was the support building, and this is a building on the the Glendale Operations Campus. This does house our facilities group. An example here that we like to look at when we compare these 2 buildings is if, funding is not unlimited, and funding is never unlimited, but if we've got 2 air conditioning systems that are aged, we look at what type of building do they support first off, and it's a planning tool, it's a management tool, of course. After we determine this one's probably a higher priority, we go in the field, we look at them, we assess them. And so that's really what we're talking about is that planning tool. We then went through, and this is just explaining that again, it's a risk-based approach. We look at what's the risk of that happening to us. And if a mission-critical building goes down, it's a high risk. Whereas if a support building goes down, not as much of a risk. And again, we never have unlimited funding, but even if we did, we need to be fiscally responsible. That's part of what we do. The way we look at things in facilities, we use a facility condition index, an FCI, and with an FCI, a low number is good. And I know everybody's familiar with pavement condition index that transportation uses. It's the inverse of that. So in pavement, a high number is good. In facilities, a low number is good. So we created kind of 3 tiers. 5 to 10% is excellent condition. We don't want a building in the 0 to 5% range because we'll probably look at wasting money. There's components of it we will keep very well maintained, but other aspects of it we may allow to defer. And when you look at that, you look at if an air conditioner has a 15-year life, you're not going to replace it year 1, but yet you've got some things you've already depreciated on that, and that's really what this 5% comes in, is we've allowed components programmatically to depreciate. To explain this, let's go through an example. Sorry, I just skipped a page. So when we're doing the building asset philosophy, we looked at Fire Station 152, and at that time, it needed about $1.5 million in repairs. And at that time, and not today, but it was $5.5 million of a replacement value that we looked at. So when you take the $1.5 million divided by the $5.5 million, it comes down to a number of 27.2%. That's its facility condition index, and that would put it in a poor category. But after we did the repairs, if we look at it today, we probably still have about $500 in repairs to it. We've gone back to Fire Station 152. We didn't leave it alone. We got it in great condition. And we've done things like the exhaust removal from the bays to kind of maintain it, but we're still managing it. And so we've got about $500,000 now. If everything being equal, and I was looking where do I put $500,000 into, I might go into the fire station, just do some minor upgrades to it. But we're managing it, and so currently today we could look at it has a little bit that we could put into it, but we're still maintaining it in that excellent condition range, and that's really how we manage our buildings. So again, just kind of in summary, we look at the 3 tiers. We look at tier 1 is our mission critical, and we manage them to keep them in a very good condition to an excellent condition. We keep that where that FCI, our deferred maintenance or our depreciation is in that 5 to 10% range. Our tier 2, our business critical, we allow them to depreciate a little bit more, and we look at that, the 10 to 15% range. And tier 3 is at 15 to 20%. Again, just a management tool of how we look at what we may want to do as kind of a priority list of what happens. Our summary of our philosophy is to always be fiscally responsible. Don't waste money, don't replace things too soon, but don't allow them to degrade so much that you have to put additional money into it. So if we don't watch our roofs and make sure that they're kept in good condition, we may have leaks or other things which actually degrade the structure. We always want to look at reliability. Water Services talks about making sure that when you turn the tap on, you've always got good, clean water. We want that of both our community and our internal staff. When they walk into a building that expects certain things to be operational, it needs to be operational. And finally, public confidence. This is really what we do in facilities to help the rest of the city, to help Brian and his group with economic development, is we need to give them a sense of confidence, and we know what we do, and we do it well. So that's really what our building asset philosophy was today. What we want to discuss now is, should we modify that philosophy? And really to go through what we went through to determine this, I'm going to turn this now over to Charles.
So based on our studies, changing the program doesn't come without small challenges. This is an aerial view of our city-owned and operated cemetery in the red square, and the green rectangles are the residential areas that are surrounding the cemetery. So part of the challenge becomes, if we would modify the program, how do we determine should the structures around the cemetery, the historic building at the cemetery, the fencing, the block walls, and so on and so forth, should that get moved up higher than a building such as City Hall or something of that nature? So just potential challenges. This is a view of our support, one of our support buildings. This is Spring City and our field operations campus. Same general idea where there's a residential area right across the street. If the program was modified, we would then need to come to council and kind of determine should these type of facilities move higher on the list versus a firehouse or mission critical. As we studied, we discovered there are potential other challenges that could come with this as well. This is a view of City Hall, one of three large buildings on our Glendale Municipal Office Complex campus. This building is business critical and is very public facing, but not in a residential area. Next slide is courts. Same thing, this is a business critical facility, very public facing, open to the public every day. Also not in a residential neighborhood. But finally, this is our fire support building on 55th and Orangewood. This is a mission critical building, very secure, not generally open to the public. This building is in a residential neighborhood. And so you can see the challenge becomes, you know, would this building become a higher priority than courts or City Hall or some of those other mission or business critical buildings that also need some of our attention? So those were just challenges. There's also a benefit to modifying or funding the program. This is Fire Station 156 before it was painted last summer, and this is after it was painted last summer. As you can see, it does improve the look of that building. It does not impact the mission of that building, but as people drive by on Deer Valley and they go home and they see that, you can imagine that the confidence in what Glendale does for them and their community, they feel that and they see that. I wanted to point out something that Councilmember Clark mentioned last week about the broken window theory. And that broken window theory is a theory that came from an article in 1982 by two criminologists. And they basically wrote that signs of disorder lead to more disorder, is basically what the premise of that theory was. That a building with broken windows that were not repaired would cause more broken windows, essentially. That's not where the city of Glendale is today, and I want to be clear on that. That's not where the city of Glendale is today, but we're here talking about it today because we want to prevent the city from getting there. So based on our studies, we went out and used the current framework that Ms. Watenko talked about earlier, and we went out and studied these buildings as we do on a regular basis, and just have some project examples for you guys to see. This is the lattice at the main library. There is a residential neighborhood nearby, but this site is not in a residential neighborhood, backs up to Saguaro Ranch Park. The lattice at the library, you can see, is chipping and peeling. In order for us to rectify that, we would have to sandblast it, we would have to prime it, we would have to power wash. There might be some scaffolding involved, a lift involved, and protection to protect from overspraying and all that. That would be rolled into that project. This is Saguaro Ranch Park. This is an example of a visible roof, but there's also railings involved. There are door frames, windows that to be painted, but taking a deeper look into that building, there's also window glazing on that historic building that would need to be taken care of before the painting to make sure that water and weather doesn't impact the interior of that building. And a lot of the building asset philosophy that Michelle was talking about was sometimes we have to take care of those infrastructure things first before we get into the aesthetics of that. This is our picture of our Glendale 11 building across the street from State Farm Stadium on Maryland Avenue. It's just aged over time, and a lot of the buildings could use a refresh. As you know, we have Super Bowl coming soon. We have Final Four coming after that, and some of these things show wear and tear, and we want to kind of get in front of that before those events come to town.
Yeah, but before you go on, and I'm glad that you brought this up because I just noticed that actually Saturday night. I was looking at that, and I thought, number one is I wonder why this hasn't been brought up. So you guys are really good mind readers. But number two, you had already mentioned with the Super Bowl coming up, we're going to have opportunities for people wanting to pay us to advertise on our windows. And rather than, and this is something I'm sure the city manager is probably already on top of, but rather than us redoing this ourselves, we have an opportunity for somebody to pay us to do it and advertise with it. So I'm sure you already got that in the plan as far as what you're doing, but this is in pretty bad shape right now. All the corners are peeling. So I'm happy that you guys were on top of this. Kind of like normal, right?
All the time, sir. Yeah. And Mayor, members of council, just want to expand on that we're not just talking about the window covering. We're talking about the railing on the patio. We're talking about the paint on the facade of the building. We're talking about all of it.
Right, right. Well, I do know that there's a lot of money available to the city with the Super Bowl coming up as far as advertiser and that big area for windows. So it's just something that I was thinking, and again, I noticed it Saturday night, and you guys are bringing it up on Tuesday. So great mind readers. Go ahead.
Oh, thank you. I guess, were you guys finished? I can wait till you're not, I'll wait till they're finished, Mayor.
Mayor, if I might thank you before you transition. These last few slides bring to my mind our philosophy of taking care of what we have before we move on and build and expand. And I think that's something we've always dealt with our CIP and other things. For instance, we take care of our racket center. We put money into that to make sure it's in good repair, so that we don't have an increase in problems. It's kind of like our streets. It wasn't our fault, but the fact that they deteriorated expanded the cost of getting them back into good repair. So, I look at these things like and just only coincidentally in my district, but the lattice work at the main library or the condition of the historic buildings at Saguaro Ranch Park. That's, if we take care of these things, now and on an ongoing basis, with a lot of cost avoidance down the road, and it also is more enjoyable to our community and more useful and more pleasurable. A contrary example would be how, not to beat a dead horse because we've moved on, but just as an example, years of neglect out at Glen Lakes Golf Course not only drove away the income to some degree that it was gaining, but it also increased the cost of getting it back into good condition, all of that. So I would hate to see that happen to anything in any district, because our residents deserve better than that. So I'd like to say that we're in a unique position perhaps now, financially, to take care of all of these things and get us back in good stead. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
So based on our studies, we'd like to provide a little bit of background and then a staff recommendation as we summarize towards the end. So as you know, there was a tremendous impact to the economy around 2008, and the city had to make several adjustments in order to sustain through that economic downturn. Some of those adjustments impacted areas such as field operations and facilities. I believe around that time, there was a request to focus on infrastructure and making sure that the the buildings and the facilities operated for the business need of the city of Glendale and for the citizens. And now, as Ms. Patenko mentioned, we're in catch-up mode. Overall, we do agree that the buildings in residential neighborhoods do need attention, as Councilmember Tomachoff mentioned previously. We also agree that all other buildings should be reviewed and addressed as needed, as Vice Mayor Adalma mentioned previously. So what we're going to ask towards the end is we are going to ask to keep the program the same, and we're going to ask to create a facility enhancement and maintenance program and create an extra or a separate funding source for that program. So there is a way for us to do both with a programmatic approach. With our current program, we've identified some projects that'll start to get us caught up, keeping in mind that we're fast approaching some of those major events that we discussed earlier. We put this list that you're going to see together to coincide with our CIP. There are some projects that are coming in our CIP, and we don't want to be on top of that or paint a building that we might be painting during CIP project anyway. So I'll move on and show you a lot of these projects that we've identified under the current program.
Mayor and Council, I think the point he's trying to get to there is some of these items, like painting a building, may not be capital, may not be allowed to be in the CIP because we can't bond for some of these projects. So we really have to work with budget and finance on, is this a capital project or is this an O&M project? And that's why we are recommending this separate program versus having many of these being in a capital project.
Thank you, Ms. Watenko. I won't bore you with all the gory details of every single project, but I do want to highlight that these are projects that are identified under our current program. The sections highlighted in yellow are buildings that are nearby or in residential neighborhoods. So this first year projects would be roughly $1.3 million with 605,000 in or around residential neighborhoods. Next slide is more of the same, around about $1.3 million with about 735,000 in or around residential neighborhoods. And in year 3, again, more of the same, except the buildings in or around residential neighborhoods are about $930,000. So in summary, all of the city buildings are important to us, and our current program clearly identifies deficiencies. If appropriately funded, the program will work as designed. A dedicated funding source is needed to create an exterior enhancement and maintenance program for all buildings. In the end, everyone wins. All buildings get touched over time, as long as the funding source is there and the citizens of Glendale see our brand maintained and improved across the city. So with that, staff recommendation is to keep the building asset philosophy the same and fund an exterior enhancement and maintenance program.
With that, Mayor, we'd open it up to any questions you may have, but we are looking for consensus on these items.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for bringing this forward. I wasn't only concerned about buildings and neighborhoods, although the issue that brought this to the front was Station 156, which is surrounded by homes in my district, and the schedule to paint it was when once every 20 years when it gets remodeled. And we wouldn't paint our houses once every 20 years. That's, and I'm glad you used the word curb appeal because it tells people who we are. The curb appeal of our city tells not just our residents, but prospective residents, neighboring communities, businesses, everyone. It tells everyone who we are. And I understand how we got here with the financial and the economics of how we ended up here, but we're in a position, at least for right now, to be able to address some of this backlog of not being able to pay attention to details. But, you know, it does matter. So I'm really, really happy. I'm absolutely supportive of moving forward with this. And these will be brought back to us on a year-to-year basis so we can, if we want to reevaluate priorities. I just like to know how moving forward, or are you asking us for approve a 3-year plan? Or what was the idea of the 1, 2, 3, year 1, year 2, year 3?
Mayor and council members, Councilmember Salmshoff, we went through kind of our assessment of buildings, and this is what we came back with as what we saw we needed. And we also knew we got an internal capacity problem where we couldn't get all this done in 1 year. So we said, why don't we do a 3-year program? This is what we came back with. Year 1 would be our priority, and we'd be welcome to listen to council and what their priorities might be and adjust them. And there may be other things that we haven't seen. I know when we initially discussed this, the mayor brought up a bridge, and we just did not get a response back from that department, but we could look at painting that bridge. I think the railings on the bridge on 67th Avenue don't look good around Thunderbird or something, but we could look at adding other projects as well.
Okay, Mayor, if I could, just one more thing. I was a little surprised to only see one parking lot resurfacing on here in the first 3 years. I know we've got a lot of work to do on parking lots citywide, so I was just curious how that one made the cut, and you know, if we have I don't know, it is cosmetic, but it's also, I mean, you know, the parking lots in all of our parks and in a lot of our facilities are in need of attention.
Mayor and Councilmember Salmshoff, as we discussed in the CIP, kind of as a reminder, we had a parking lot program in there. Year 1, we had projects identified, but we're in the middle of doing an assessment of all parking lots. So once we looked at it, we did this in conjunction with transportation and parks. The list of parking lots kept growing and growing and growing. So we've actually got an assessment of them. I know the facility staff is going through them right now with transportation, with engineering. We're trying to put a priority to them and some numbers to that, but we look at bringing that program to you in the next year.
Mayor, so I'm just curious then, would it be better to move the food bank, I mean, it's not till next year, but parking lot into that project and move something else up onto the list that's more of a cosmetic thing?
Mayor and Council, we could do that. The food bank hit this list because it did not make the other one. When we were looking at city-owned properties, and for some reason that one got missed because we leased that out to the food bank. It is city-owned, so somehow it was missed. It wasn't part of the other assessment. So between the two of them, we just don't want to forget about that parking lot.
All right, we can have that conversation later, but that's a suggestion. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. I support continuing the philosophy that you have been using and are reiterating today. I support the idea of creating a separate funding source. But I want to get back to something that you said about the broken window theory. We know the Super Bowl is coming in February of next year. Is there going to be any attention given to, for example, you identified the media center, which is front-facing. It's right across the street from the stadium. 70,000 plus people are going to see that media center, and whatever condition it's in. I would think, excuse me, things like the media center or the convention center or the civic center that may be rented out for events, Super Bowl events, or tourist attractions like Saguaro Ranch Park, Manistee Ranch, perhaps Paseo Racket Center, places like that we know may very well be used by visitors who are here for the Super Bowl. Have you focused in on those items? And maybe it's an aberration from your philosophy, which I approve of, but I would think that there would be some special attention paid to those front-facing buildings that the general public, especially the visitor public, will see around Super Bowl time. Thank you, Mayor.
Mayor, Councilmember, we did, we looked specifically at the media center, and it was when we were standing back, looking from a distance, we saw, there was some, as Mr. Thomas pointed out, there was some railing damage that was done by a tree, and we had the tree removed, and we were standing there talking, and we looked closely and then saw there was a much bigger issue with covering on the window. We do have some other projects in for Civic Center. We could look then, because what we gave you was a 3-year program of how we developed it. We could look at those that might be even more public facing in light of the events coming up and reprioritize those.
Mayor, if I could, I think that's important that we put our best foot forward in February of next year. And I have no problem with the program you identified, and perhaps that could be adopted after we attend to those front-facing buildings that are most likely to be identified during the Super Bowl season. So I hope that you will at least consider that. Thank you.
And I'm going to go back to what I said earlier. The media center, the windows, is one of the very few things that we have the opportunity to have somebody pay us to fix that problem. So I really hope that you focus on that. I don't remember what the dollars were 7 years ago, but it was pretty substantial as far as what they paid to do the windows for advertising out there. Mr. Milner.
Thank you. I, too, agree with your philosophy. I think it's a great program. I think you've put a lot of effort into it, and I support it moving forward. Along with Councilmember Clark, I would suggest the same concept, and I'll point out the one that I'm most interested in, which is Paseo Racket Club, of course, the only city facility in my district that's not a park. It attracts organizations from around the country, literally, on an ongoing basis. And so this facility does see a lot of outside traffic, perhaps more so than many of our other buildings. It's not just a one-time thing. It's an ongoing. And the concern that I've heard from the operators of that facility is that it's harder to attract the high dollar hotel spending, consumers to come to tournaments there if the facility isn't looking the best that it can. And so I would recommend we move it up in priority. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Thomas, thank you for your presentation. It was great. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I'm happy to know that we're going to continue in the philosophy and the methodology that you guys have put in place years ago. That just tells me that we have the right leadership and we have the right facilities team to facilitate the needs of the citizens' buildings that they own. And I just want to say thank you so much. Have a lot of confidence in your work. I look forward to seeing some of the aesthetic pleasing repairs you're going to do to other buildings other than just this one. But thank you. Great team and good work today. Ms. Wotanko, thank you.
Anyone else? Good.
Mayor, I agree with the media center. That's going to be not just probably the people who actually attend the Super Bowl, but it's probably going to be highly visible by the television viewing audience as well. So I don't know. I mean, I see that there's 150,000 in year 2, and I would be supportive of, switching some things around to move that. I'm trying to find it again now. Repairing the plaster, painting the exterior, moving that up in priority, and identifying 150,000 worth of things that could be moved down into the second year. I would be fine with that. I think that's probably a good idea. The windows, we can wait and see. I think the mayor's right. I think there's going to be plenty of opportunity, hopefully, and I'm sure Ian agrees that they're not going to be using Glendale's Got Game anymore anyway. So that probably needs to come down anyway. But I mean, I think we could identify, the city court ramadas maybe could be moved into year 2. That frees up 100,000. We could figure it out. But I do think that it's important that the media center is looking good, because it's probably going to be highly visible for the people watching on television also. I'm sorry, I couldn't. What?
Mayor and Councilmember Solonshoff, there's money for the media center year 1. If you go back a slide, we put into 2 phases. Okay.
I saw that, but I mean, it didn't include the painting, and I mean, it wasn't just the window. If you look at the picture of the media center, you can see that especially the orange paint is pretty faded. I mean, the building hasn't, I don't know when the last time the exterior of that building was touched, probably when it was finished, whatever year that was. So for one, I mean, the courts, obviously it's important, but it's not in a neighborhood. It's not going to affect any residential. I'd be fine with rearranging some of this to move the $150,000 that we would need to paint the building and really make it look nice into year one, and sliding some of that other stuff down into year two.
Okay, Mr. Phelps.
Mayor, members of the council, thank you for the conversation. First, with regards to the Civic Center, the timing is going to be somewhat important. In discussions with leadership from the Renaissance Hotel, they're working on a fairly aggressive plan for a renovation of the hotel. I've asked them to kind of coordinate with us regarding any exterior changes, because if you look at the way the media center and our convention center, it integrates into the Renaissance Hotel. What I wouldn't want to do is necessarily go out and paint it next year only to find that they're going to propose a kind of a different cosmetic look that now it's not compatible. I think we can address for sure the window issue and some of the maybe more straightforward things like trim on the fixing of the railings and some things like that. But I am trying to coordinate their remodeling plans so we can kind of coordinate with that. We'll keep you certainly up to speed on that. And I agree with, however, the general premise that as we welcome the world, and literally a Super Bowl is welcoming the world to our footsteps, that we want to make sure that our most visible areas, have been updated. Recently just signed off on over $300,000 in new wayfinding signage for that area. And again, that was being anticipated for this. If you're driving down Glendale Avenue, major remodeling going on our Glendale Avenue, trying to get that road ready. So we are focused on that, and but that was just one nuance on the painting of the media center. We'll see what we can do to get it looking really sharp. At the same time, we don't want to invest money that only maybe have to turn around and redo it. I just want to compliment the staff on the work, as you say, put a lot of effort into this policy. Now, here's the good news. We didn't really mention this during the budget rollout, but our proposed budget has the $1.3 million of these projects already in the proposed budget that's come that you're now considering. So we were obviously hoping that you would be excited about this approach to maintaining our facilities. And as Michelle said, we can always reevaluate the projects that are on that list. Things will happen, things can get damaged or deteriorate, so it can be a very fluid process. We'll talk internally about how we bring that forward, each year, and it doesn't mean that we don't increase that amount. We may get to the point that maybe the 1.3 million over each year is maybe not getting to the goal that the council wants to have. But we wanted to start one place. They put together, I think, a really thoughtful look at it with the assessment. So we appreciate the feedback, and we'll move forward then based on your recommendation.
Thank you. And item number 5.
Boards and commissions ordinance.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. The item for you today is dealing with boards, commissions, and ordinances, and primarily the challenges that we faced with boards and commissions. And let me just see if this is working from. Oh. Thank you. The Glendale City Charter provides that the council can form any committee, board, or commission that they see fit. It also recognizes that in some instances there's statutory requirements that you have boards and commissions. And over time, as boards and commissions have been formed, there's been different rules, different bylaws, different operating procedures that they may have adopted over time. And what we have found working with the clerk's office is that there is a need for consistency and clarity in the bylaws. To give you some ideas, one of the greatest challenges I think we face over time is that at times boards and commissions will create subcommittees with an express purpose that the council is unaware of or staff isn't aware of. And what we're trying to do is make sure that when there is a question that's being considered by a board and commission, that the council is aware of it and staff is aware of it. Keeping in mind that boards and commissions are advisory, they're 100% advisory in nature. And so before they run out and create a question and then answer the question and then present us with the answer, we want to make sure that there's some consistency there. Also, over time, boards and commissions had changed or modified their own practices, which sometimes conflicted with council desires. As a reminder, you may recall when we, with the Judicial Selection Advisory Board, there was, the council has the authority with regards to the decision-making and with regards to having the board review the candidates that had applied for a job, but somewhere in their formation of bylaws, the board said that they wanted to review all applicants, which there's a distinction between an applicant and a candidate. And so there is, again, that example of a clarity. So noting this, what I'm going to be briefly speaking about is the proposal for uniform bylaws, and this has been studied by the Government Services Committee with support from the City Clerk's office and in my office, so thank you to the Government Services Committee for taking the time. There's been a fair amount of time taken reviewing this, and thank you to the Clerk's office. And I should magnify that with the Clerk's office, because the Clerk's office is usually the one that receives the question when there's a challenge with the Board of Commission and put in the situation of providing a response. So noting that what's being proposed is uniform bylaws. And what I've put up on the screen is just some examples of what's going to be included in those. We're first going to start out with kind of definitional sections, which generally occurs in an ordinance. We're also going to speak about how the board or commission is formed. And from a practical standpoint, nothing is really changing from the current practice with the council. They'll go through the Government Services Commission. The council will have the opportunity to speak about that in executive session, and then they will be appointed by the council as a matter of practice. Qualifications, one question that came up, and I have a follow-up on this because I've been given some feedback, and I'm going to ask this question because I'll have direction at the end of the presentation. Qualifications, the bylaws set out clearly what the qualifications are to be a member of a board. The primary change that would occur is that to be a member of a board, commission, or committee in the city of Glendale is that you need to be a resident of the city. Noting, of course, that the council has the flexibility to amend that on a per board or per commission or committee basis, keeping in mind what we're doing right now is we're creating just a uniform set of bylaws. So once you adopt these, you'll be able to amend them on a case-by-case basis. Also, it speaks to the chair and the vice chair. Again, that will be a similar process. The recommendation by the board comes to the GSC. The GSC will recognize that, and that will be an adoption by the council. Where this really comes into play is down towards the end of the Government Services Committee. There's always been some questions about what is the role of the Government Services Committee, and that has been incorporated now into the bylaws. It speaks clearly to what that role is. It also speaks clearly how the government services will be engaged when there is a proposal for a subcommittee. If there is a subcommittee, it must come to the Government Services Committee, and they will consider whether or not they would like to give that authority to that board or commission, and then that will come before the council. Also, with regards to the bylaws, if a board or commission would like to amend the uniform bylaws, it needs to come back to the Government Services Commission and/or they need to notify the clerk. So we all know what we're doing in that regard. So because there's the proposal of a uniform bylaws, we also had to change the original establishment ordinances of all of the boards and commissions, and so we did that as well. That's why it's so thick. What I need you to know is that when we made the changes to those establishment ordinances, there were no substantive changes. We didn't change the authority that the council had already granted. We did not change their powers or authorities. All we tried to do is we would try to incorporate the new bylaws. So in the event that there was a conflict, we adopted what the uniform bylaws were proposing and made those changes. We also, in all of the boards and commissions, adopted a consistent format. So you'll see now when you pull up a an ordinance for a board or a commission, you will see that there's 4 sections. The first is the mission. What is the mission that the council has granted this board or commission? The second is whether they're bylaws. All of them currently state that they will follow the adopted bylaws that you'll be adopting if in fact you do that, are the uniform bylaws. Noting that in the event if there's ever a change or there's a proposal for a change, we would come back to the council and that's where we would make that amendment to deviate from the uniform bylaws. So everybody knows where to go. The third section would be the composition, and that's the membership of the board. And then the last would be the powers, duties, and responsibilities. And my final comment is that what we have found, one of the challenges, and the clerk's office I think can attest to this, is that at times boards and commissions start adopting practices that nobody's really understanding. Those were not adopted into ordinance. Those were not adopted when we made the changes to the establishment ordinance. What the boards and commissions will be notified and educated on is that in the event they want to make changes, that they will actually come back to the clerk's office and to the GSC and discuss those changes before they actually make those changes. So again, these are your boards and commissions. We're clarifying the uniform bylaws. We're clarifying and creating a cleaner formative formation ordinance and hopefully create some clarity. With that, if you have any questions of me, I can pause. Otherwise, I have 2 comments that have been provided to me, and I wanted to bring those to your attention. And as a final closing statement on that, noting that we are not considering this tonight. This is being presented to you, and we will consider it in 2 weeks. So if you have a lot of questions, if you'd like to, I will make myself available, and then I'll make sure that Julie makes herself available. We'll make ourselves both available jointly if that's the case, so you can understand why those occurred. And we will sit down with you and go through those. If there aren't any questions, I do want to ask 2 questions I would like direction on. Good. Okay, thank you. I did receive some feedback. One of the questions that has arisen, the proposal for membership is that all members must be residents of the city of Glendale. One proposal that I received was that there would be a deviation from that uniform bylaw on the Planning and Zoning Commission. And for the Planning and Zoning Commission only, that members may be owners of businesses operating in the city of Glendale. And so noting that, if there's some opinion or direction on that, that would be great to get that direction. I can go ahead and incorporate that change. Otherwise, we'll leave it the way that it currently is, and that is that you must be a resident of the city of Glendale to be in the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Well, I guess I'll go ahead and start off. I do like that because I know that we're having some issues with some of these commissions. You know, my thought, if it's a business owner that owns property and holds a current business license in the city of Glendale, that shows they're active in the city of Glendale, I don't know why we would preclude them when a lot of businesses actually are much more involved than just residents. So I would definitely support that myself.
Mayor.
Go ahead.
I would agree with that proposition as well. When not just anybody outside the city, but somebody that is engaged in the city, someone that has an active business, for example, in the city. I think it would be appropriate to allow them to be on a commission. And I know there's been times where I've gone to appoint someone who's very active in the chamber or some other organization, and I don't live in the city, yet they're engaged very heavily in the city. And I think there are occasions, and I would extend that to nearly all the commissions if it is that situation only. I would not want to see it just carte blanche. You can appoint anyone, whether it's the Planning Commission or any other commission that don't live in the city, but rather they have to have a connection and a tie to the city, whether they have an ownership in the business or they have some other reason why they're very much engaged in the city of Glendale.
Thank you, Mayor. would that meet, I mean, is there some proportion of the, and you said this, at least what you were proposing was just the planning commission, so this is my question. Does some portion of the planning commission statutorily, because I think there's state statute about planning commissions, and does some number of those people, like, could, I mean, not that it would happen, but what if everybody on the planning commission was a business owner but not a resident? Does that meet the statutory requirements for the planning commission?
Mayor and council, yes.
Okay. And then, Mayor, if I could, how would those appointments, just like I mean, anyone could appoint someone that was a business owner? I mean, would we have to establish set criteria of, you know, it has to be, like the mayor said, somebody with that owns a business, owns property, or owns a business, or both? Or I just want to make sure I understand what's being proposed.
What my suggestion was is that a business owner, licensed business owner in the city of Glendale that has an operating business, not just a property owner, not somebody that owns an acre, but somebody that has a thriving business under a license from Glendale.
Right, Mayor, I understood that, but what I'm saying is, do you want it also to be a business owner and a property owner? Like a lot of people have businesses in Glendale, but they're leasing a building or so are we going to require that you, in addition to having an active business license, you are also a property owner in Glendale?
That was my suggestion.
Okay.
That was my suggestion.
Okay, I just want to make sure I understood it. Thank you.
Yeah. Councilmember Clark.
I would be more comfortable if it was someone with an active business license and a property owner, and I would add 1/3 criteria: demonstrated involvement or activism within the community, because there are a lot of people that will meet the criteria for having a license and owning property that we've never heard of, seen of, and have never been involved in the life of this community. So I think it's important that there be demonstrated a previous interest and activity within the city of Glendale, and that'd be demonstrated. Thank you.
Mr. Bailey.
And Mayor and council, just to a quick point with Councilmember Clark, just as a reminder, you do not absolve yourself of any authority in this. This is just the qualification for somebody to be recommended or applied. So to the extent that question of demonstrated involvement, that question will still be a question of the council in determining whether or not to appoint somebody. So you will still have that power. It's just that in my recommendation would be to have objective criteria, such as you must have an active business license, which is an objective criterion, and owning property. The challenge becomes, from a staff perspective, of what's demonstrated involvement, and that's really more so in an appointment authority. That's kind of a discussion you may have.
Well,
We can
Mayor,
vote to approve or not.
Mayor, if I could continue. Could it be phrased in such a way as to just say that we expect the applicant to demonstrate involvement within the community and not outline what that activity or involvement entails, but simply that it is expected? Would that be all right or no?
Mayor, Councilmember, I think that's fine. I think that is already incorporated somewhat in our code. But I think probably from this point, I think as a concept, I think it can work. If there's consensus, I think it's probably, you and I can then work on language that would satisfy your desire, if the council in fact wants to move in that direction.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Hugh.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I'm in agreement with our ability to appoint whom we want as a business owner to serve on the Planning Commission. They probably have a little bit more invested than others in our community who work outside of the city. This person lives outside of the city, but he's supporting us by running a business. And I think it's a good idea. Thank you.
Mr. O'Donnell.
I'm good. I can give consensus for that.
Okay. Mr. Turner.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm curious as to whether other communities have non-residents on their commissions, and then specifically planning and zoning. And I realize you may not have that answer today, but it could be provided in the future. It occurs, for me at least, that our planning commission hasn't been one that's been difficult to find residents that would be willing to serve. Some of our other commissions have more trouble with us being able to have, find residents interested in them. The Planning Commission is, I think for many is thought of as a plum. It's a significant and important appointment. All of our commissions, I think, serve as our bench in the community. It's a place where people get more experience and more insight into the workings of the community, and then it's a grooming location, particularly on planning for individuals who might be interested in running for office here in the city, which a non-resident wouldn't be eligible for. So I'm not saying heck no. I'm just saying I've got some questions and some concerns about it. I know I had proposed having non-residents on a culturally related commission that we were doing a while back, and where it would be interfacing with the school districts and other things that transcend our boundaries. But so in a situation like that, it seems to make sense to me, where you might want a representative from a school that might be an individual that doesn't live, hold a position in a school district that doesn't actually live in the city. I've got reservations, but I'm interested and I'm willing to consider.
Right, so on this item, do we have a consensus to move forward on this item?
Yes, sir.
And Mayor,
Right, go
may
ahead.
I work with the city attorney on the language about interest?
Was there more?
And just for clarity's sake, would you like that change to just planning and zoning, or do you want it in the uniform bylaws?
What do you think?
I would say just planning.
Just
Planning?
Interesting.
planning?
I'm on planning now. You want to do all?
Mayor?
Well, that's what they're saying. What if we approved it for planning now, see how it goes, and if it works fine, maybe we can change it to everything later.
Okay.
Does that sound like a plan?
Well, I mean, I'm fine with changing it to everything now. I mean, I know a couple times I've struggled to find somebody for the Aviation Advisory Commission in particular, where it's a pretty specialized commission. It's an important commission, but somebody has to know something about aviation. So, a Board of Adjustment requires some specific skill set also. Sort of like the Planning Commission, but maybe not quite to that level. So I'd be fine with opening it up now citywide. It's up to the council member to make the appointment, and then it's up to the council to approve it, so.
Mr. Bailey?
Mayor and Councilmember Tolmachoff, my second item goes to your question, actually, in your comments, and that is that one of the greatest challenges we experience from a staff perspective is that while people may have the best intentions to serve on a board or commission, attendance becomes a challenge. And so we wanted to bring that to your attention and see if the council was comfortable with that question, possibly as this is developed, to take that question back to the GSC and speak to the GSC about what boards and commissions there may be the opportunity to look at what the membership number is, recognizing, and this is why I want to make sure the entire council is aware of this, recognizing that at some point in time, the recommendation may be less than 7 members, which means a recommendation may come back that it's less than 7 members with at-large appointments. And I'm not saying that we're doing it, I'm just asking, is the council comfortable with staff bringing that question back to the GSC, and then we can report back to council at a later date?
Well, I would ask you to rephrase the question, but with that, I'd like to throw in one other thought. Something that I actually was thinking is there any objection to where if we just had everybody at large? So if you're having a tough time and somebody else has 2 members, that we still have to approve them, but we're all struggling. I mean, everybody honest, we're all struggling to find appointees. So if we had it at large, then I think it opens up a lot more opportunities for us. We still have to approve it.
Mayor, for me, I think I do a pretty good job of keeping my appointments full, and I've got a lot of applications on file, so I would like to reserve an opportunity for the residents in my district. And I wouldn't want them to not have an opportunity because the commission's full of at-large appointments. So I don't know, I'm not sure I mean, I'm willing to have the conversation in GSC and see if GSC is willing to take that back to the full council. I mean, I'm open to the conversation, but I know that we had talked about letting council members appoint people from, like saying, hey, I can't find anybody from the Aviation Advisory Commission. Do you have any applications on file for residents in your district that I may want to appoint? But rather than just saying they're all at large and then you may not have an opening for somebody in your district that wants to serve. So we can have the conversation, but I don't know whether I'd be in favor of that or not.
I agree with Councilmember Tomachoff. Let's take one baby step and go ahead and approve a change for Planning Commission. And I would like to see GSC revisit the other issues that are being brought up and then brought to council in E-session for further discussion. I'm not ready to move and change everything right now, but I am supportive of the change for Planning Commission.
Mayor, thank you. I support what Councilmember Clark just mentioned. However, are we talking about business owners only in the district of the council member, or I can choose any business owner in any part of Glendale?
Well, that sort of comes back to the earlier question that I had.
And Mayor and Council, I think those are two separate questions. One, I think there's a direction on that we will for planning and zoning. And understand, planning and zoning is and let me give you the practical reality. Planning and zoning is not a commission that we generally have a challenge with in terms of finding appointments and attendance. But some of the other commissions, we will struggle with attendance. We'll struggle with quorum. And just the question becomes, in just speaking about those specific boards or commissions, in some instances, that 7, we struggle with getting 7. If we had 5, we may be able to meet on a regular basis, if that was the case. The challenge becomes now, as we've created a system, or the proposal would be creating a system, that there's not at-large recommendations. The appointment is still a council appointment, but the recommendations, the council's actually operated under the practice of 7 members. Each individual will have the right to appoint somebody there. And again, there's no proposal on the table. It's really, I just wanted to make sure if this is something that staff wants to talk to the GSC about, the entire council's aware that we're having that conversation. It will have to come back to the council, though.
Mr. Bailey, I want to be clear what you're saying. So if we didn't go at large, if we kept our district system along with 1 at large for myself, 7 people could be appointed to a committee, but they would not be able to operate unless they had at least 5 with a quorum of 3. Is that correct? Is that what you're saying?
No. He's saying make it 5.
No. But what I'm saying is right now there are boards and commissions that have 7 members. They need 4 people to show up. We only get 3 who show up on a regular basis. If the membership number was 5, 3 is sufficient to conduct business every time. And so part of this may even be the question that when we come back to the council that we redefine what quorum is. The challenge becomes is that you want to be cautious about having a membership of a size where quorum is less than a simple majority, because then you can find that a minority will dictate the outcome of all decisions in the event that people don't attend.
Yeah, let me just finish. And the reason why I asked that question, and I believe you are correct, take it back to the Government Services Commission so they can bring us back some information. But what could happen if it was that large is I could select someone from the Yucca District business owner, as could Councilmember Clark, as could Councilmember Turner. Now we're weighed only one side of the community. Is why we don't, one of the reasons why we have districts not at large for council members. So I'd hate for that to be a byproduct. I think the best is to send it to the GSC and have them bring us back a proposal.
Yeah,
So,
we need more discussion.
yeah.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a question. Are we offering hybrid type meetings for boards and commissions? Because if we're having trouble getting quorums, especially, as gas prices and everything else, I mean, do we allow people to participate remotely? That may be a way to resolve the quorum issue if somebody doesn't have to try to, rush over here after work.
Mayor and council, and the clerk can speak to this if she'd like as well, but we offer alternatives for attendance and still struggle at times to have attendance.
Okay, so we are offering virtual as an, whatever, well, you can come or you can log in. Okay, thank you.
Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. A couple of things. Under the way we do business currently, council members, my impression is a council member can appoint any resident to a commission. If it's a resident that's not in their district, they show the other council member the courtesy of consulting or communicating about it. But we have a number of appointees who are from other districts. It's because from the council member, it's only a recommendation. It's the entire council that actually makes the appointment. And so is that correct? We're not restricted to only people in our district.
Mayor and Councilman were correct, unless in some governing ordinance it requires that it be a district, but generally no. You can select somebody. It's your selection.
Yeah.
That district has a selection.
Thank you. And except that maybe somewhere in some enabling one of these of the 20, there was something different. And then also in my experience, and having served as GSC chair, I think twice now, the quorum attendance issues generally correspond with vacancies on the commission. I think it's very rare that we have a fully appointed commission have a trouble meeting quorum. And is it rare that we have, so I guess it's rare that we have that. So therefore, it appears to me that this really what we have is a duty here for the members of the council to make their appointments. And with a city of 250,000+ residents, and a good portion of those being adults, I find it hard to believe that, given some attention to it, that we can't find residents to serve on our commissions. Some of us have no trouble. Thank you.
Mr. Milner.
Thank you, Mayor. I would agree with many of the sentiments that have been expressed today. In particular, I do not wish to change it to an at-large system. I believe the district system works. I believe it gives us the flexibility to appoint, and I think this is something that as a council we need to be a little more diligent. If we've been struggling to find an appointment for a specific commission, that we do look to other districts and ask if there are some folks in those other districts that we could appoint until we get the nominations or the applications within our own district. So I think leaving it that way works. I believe that that the issue with attendance, I think you addressed it in this new ordinance, and we have a process that maybe was already being used, but it's now written, and it talks to how we deal with attendance issues, and that we need to be diligent as council members once those issues are brought forward and taken care of, that we find the proper appointments to fill those vacancies. And I think that's the key. I have perhaps been a little lax at times in getting my vacancies filled. And so I think if we're all just a little bit more diligent, that we can take care of that within the guidelines of district boundaries.
Thank you, Mayor. You'll see it in 2 weeks, and I'll be following up with Councilmember Clark.
Okay, Ms. Bauer, item number 6, if you would.
Request for City Council to amend Glendale City Code, Chapter 25, regarding grass and weeds over 6 feet tall.
Mayor, members of the council, here to provide staff report on our last item this afternoon. Number 6 is Deputy City Manager Rick St. John.
Good afternoon, Mayor, members of the council. It is 6 inches. I think that there's a misprint in the, my apologies.
I took that as long as it's between 6 inches and 6 feet, we're okay.
We're all good, right? Yeah. So from the Code Review Committee, there was a recommendation to change the language in Chapter 25, that's the nuisance code, specifically subsection 21 for land maintenance, subsection G that deals with weeds. Essentially what the Code Review Committee wanted was for us to deal with blight issues, rodent infestations, and health and safety issues. So in the past, we had the standard 6-inch. So if you had grass or weeds taller than 6 inches in your yard, that was considered a violation. And if you had grass or weeds less than 6 inches growing out of your sidewalk, for example, that created a hazard, it was not a violation because the code said 6 inches. And so we made that amendment. Council adopted that amendment in August of '21. We are now enforcing, because of the season we are in, against grass and weeds. We have a number of cases that are coming through proactively and by complaint. And we've realized that we really do need the 6-inch standard for people that have a yard. So whether they have a grass front yard or desert landscape, in the court process, particularly the civil process, it's better for us to have an objective standard. Now, we can still have the subjective standard, more subjective standard, if you will, for the sidewalks and the tripping hazards or things that cause health and safety issues. So essentially, the amendment that's before you today adds that language back in, that on any property that you own or that you have control or responsibility over, you cannot have grass or weeds in excess of 6 inches in height. In addition, you can't create health and safety issues. You can't have grass or weeds that lend to rodent infestations or any other language that, blighting conditions, any other language that we've considered in the past. And so with that, I'm happy to answer any questions there may be on this minor amendment.
Thank you, Mayor. The only question or concern I have is that if I don't want the 6-inch to then become the standard. As you stated, it gives us the opportunity to use I guess a subjective standard, and I would like to make sure that the public is aware that it isn't 6 inches only in the area of the desert landscape and the property fronting the street, that kind of thing. And I'd like to add some language in there that clarifies that the 6-inch, nevertheless, something like that, regardless of whether it is less than 6-inch height, regardless of whether it is less than the 6-inch height restriction listed herein at the very end. In other words, as it addressed here, it says, furthermore, no person owning or occupying any property fronting on any street, alley, or public place shall allow grass or weeds to grow in the sidewalk cracks, curb line opening, or other area adjacent to the property, including parking lots that may create a tripping hazard, comma, regardless of whether it is less than 6 inches height restriction previously mentioned. Adding that language so that it clarifies that it's not just 6 inches, it could be less than 6 inches, because in many times 6-inch grass in a sidewalk is dangerous at 3 inches, not just 6 inches.
Yeah, my question is, do you even need to state that if it's a tripping hazard, it's a tripping hazard no matter what the height?
May I answer your question? Yes, because what can happen is the resident can read it and say they read 6-inch, and that's all they see. Mm-hmm. And we need to make sure that they understand it's not just 6-inch in these particular cases. You do have to spell it out, otherwise all they'll see is 6-inch.
Go ahead.
Thank you. You said something when you read the very first part, no person owning or occupying any property, but you also said somebody responsible for. So do you think we should include that, or like that would include property managers as well? Or because normally do we work with the property managers, not the property owner on commercial properties?
Good point.
Mayor, members of the council, there's a separate chapter that deals with rental properties, where we not only address, or not only have the ability to address the owner occupant, or I should say occupant, because it's a rental property, we can also address the owner of the property or the management company that's responsible for the property. So that's chapter 29,
okay,
if I'm not mistaken.
All right, then I'm fine with it. And I agree with Councilmember Melner. I mean, if you tell somebody 6 inches, I mean, we're kind of going for, the fewer weeds, the better. We don't want people to say, well, my weeds are only 5.5 inches, so I'll wait till they get to 6 inches and then I'll do something about it. So yeah. What we want is compliance for spraying and maintaining, and that's what we're looking for.
Yeah. And I'm not arguing the 6 inches. What my point was, if it's a tripping hazard, it could be 1/4 of an inch. If it's a tripping hazard, it's a tripping hazard. So I don't know how you write that, maybe if it's private property in a yard, not on a sidewalk, then 6 inches is not an issue, right? If it's on a sidewalk or in a right-of-way area that's not normally considered a yard, then that's what makes me concerned if you try to put down a particular height. If it's a tripping hazard, it's a tripping hazard. And that could be a tree root on top of that. It doesn't have to be grass or weeds.
Mayor, I think that's what Council Members Malnar's language rectifies.
I don't know.
When he puts in regardless of the height, with regard to sidewalk issues or public right-of-way issues. My concern is both residents and the department, if it is 6 inches only that is recognized within the code, all parties will use that as a fallback position. That's why I like the language that Councilmember Malnar has suggested, which clearly states that on sidewalks and public right-of-way, regardless of the height, if it provides a safety issue, then it needs to be corrected. So I would support Councilmember Malnar's suggestion.
Mayor, may I add some clarity?
Please.
The first line of the amended ordinance deals with all property. The second sentence of the same subsection deals with desert landscaping. And so on desert landscaped property, if it's a blight condition or could harbor infestation, we can address that even if it's 5 inches in height, 4.5 inches in height, because the ordinance allows for that. The 6 inch is really the catch-all for all other types of front yards that exist within our community. And so if somebody has a grass front yard and they've allowed their grass to grow beyond 6 inches, without this language in the code, it's hard for us to say that that's a blight condition.
Mayor, again, I understand what you're saying, but I do believe that Councilmember Malnar addresses a specific concern, which is that of not front yards so much as sidewalks and other public rights of way, where we don't want to encourage 6 inches as being the Magno line, if you wish, that becomes a fallback position for all parties involved. So that's why I like his language, because it says, regardless of the height, if it's a safety issue or an infestation issue, it needs to be addressed. So I really don't have any problem with his suggestion.
And Mayor, Councilmember Clark, I didn't mean to suggest that I did either. I don't think the suggestion detracts from what we're trying to do. I think it does provide a little more clarity. If that's the direction of the council, we're happy to do that.
Mayor?
Go ahead.
Mr. St. John, just probably down in the weeds, no pun intended, question, but so when grass grows from the yard into the sidewalk, it doesn't say how you have to remove it, you just have to prevent it or remove it, but so because it's city property, can a homeowner spray like a weed killer, and is that okay? Or you have to get rid of it?
Mayor, members of the council, Vice Mayor, you can get rid of it by any means.
Okay.
So you can spray it, and then once it's dead, remove it.
And the reason I'm asking is people walk their dogs on sidewalk, and are we causing an issue if somebody wants to sue somebody because they got poisoned their dog? I mean, I know it's down in the weeds, but are we protected against that?
Mayor,
or is the homeowner
Vice
protected
Mayor,
against
I
that?
would think that we would be protected against an issue like that.
Okay.
I think the only, and I won't speak as an attorney.
Or the homeowner,
right?
Protected,
but if we order or mandate that the resident use a chemical spray, I think we would maybe encounter some problems then, but we would never do that.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I'm supportive of your proposed language change. I believe, to the extent that I understand it without reading it, I'm also supportive of Councilmember Molnar's contribution to that. this is one of the higher priority or higher quantity, I should say, of complaints that I get in my office. And I think it's the number one. It's at the top of the code compliance chart this month and last month and the month before. So I think it's important that we have clear language that we can educate our population on and then enforce as necessary. But, and I understand that our code, I think it specifically calls out any person. And, you know, I would say that I understand the need for that, but I think that as a city, we ought to be setting the good example. And that I had a resident bring to my attention weeds that were at least knee-high, if not taller, on some city-controlled property. And when I submitted that on Glendale 1, the response back was as though we only deal with that on a quarterly basis. And I don't think that that's an excuse we would accept from a resident. I only mow my lawn on a quarterly basis. So I think that the city ought to be leading the way and controlling our own weeds on our own property. Thank you.
Anyone else? You have what you need?
Yes, sir, thank you.
Okay. Next item, city manager report, Mr. Phelps.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. I've got two quick items. As you know, this past February, the city received an upgrade bond rating for its general obligation debt. Well, the good news continues. We have been notified by S&P Global Ratings that the city excise bond rating and for our transportation excise tax and municipal property corporation tax has been upgraded from AA- to AA. Now, while it's always fun to celebrate these increases, this one is of particular noteworthy that I'd bring to your attention. As your reminder, during Glendale's financial crisis over 10 years ago, these are the bonds specifically that were downgraded to BBB-, which is just one step above being rated as junk bonds. And as most on this council, as you were taking office for the first time, you inherited with one of the lowest bond ratings in the nation. Today's rating increase follows a series of upgrades that began in 2016. They are an independent validation of the tremendous work that this council and our staff have done to restore Glendale's financial health, and at the same time while we're strategically accomplishing all of our economic development goals. So good news again continues. Also, we got some good news again earlier this morning in that we were notified that ASDA has announced that the State Farm Stadium will host the 2022 Mex Tour with a marquee matchup of the Mexican national soccer team and Uruguay. This match will be on Thursday, June 2nd, and is part of the FIFA World Cup, which will be held in Qatar this November. Each time the Mexican national team has played here at State Farm Stadium, they have set attendance records each time. And not only do they draw significantly from the country of Mexico, but they draw from states throughout the Southwest. So we're really excited about that as they continue to come in and stay in our Glendale hotels and shop in our stores and eat in our restaurants and bars. So again, this is just another series of continuing events being programmed in our sports entertainment district that really demonstrate that Glendale is a premier destination for the biggest events and concerts here in the state of Arizona. And that concludes my report.
Good report. City Attorney.
No report, thank you.
Okay, council item special interest. Councilmember Clark.
None at this time, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Hugh.
None, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Milner.
Nothing today, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Tomachon.
Nothing today, Mayor.
Councilmember Turner.
Not today, Mayor.
Vice Mayor.
Nothing, Mayor.
You guys are awesome. I don't have anything either. So with that, I'm just going to go back and have the city manager tell some more good stuff. We have executive session. Motion to go into executive session, please.
Second.
I have a motion from Councilmember Milner, a second from Councilmember Tomachon. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, vote nay. Appears the ayes have it. Do have it. This council is recessed for exec.